kind of just had to fall into entrepreneurship. I think Blok became a bit more intentional and designed by 2014, but certainly my arrival into entrepreneurship was unintentional. I was going to be an architect, and it's certainly been the school of hard knocks. But I think that's every entrepreneur's journey.
Hello and welcome to the Real Good Property Podcast, a podcast by Neighbor Good, designed for the next generation of property entrepreneurs doing cool things. Today we have Jacques van Embden, the founder and CEO of Blok Developments. If you know anything about Blok, they've been around the Sea Point neighborhood doing incredible things. There's cranes dotted all down Main Road, and he's been someone who's completely transformed the built environment in that neighborhood, as well as the rest of Cape Town. He shares some of his tactics, his personal stories that are super valuable for anyone in the property and entrepreneurial space. Enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Real Good Podcast by Neighbor Good. It's awesome to see everyone here again today. Today we have an incredible guest on our show, Jacques van Embden, who is the CEO and co-founder or founder of Blok. Blok is an incredible company that is doing so many cool things in the city of Cape Town. If you don't know them, you should definitely check them out. Jacques, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Murray, and a very kind introduction.
That's good, man. If you have to look at Sea Point in Wikipedia, I'm convinced that if you scroll down, it will say a neighborhood by Blok. Tell me about how your love for Sea Point and for Cape Town started and your career in property.
Yeah. So it's actually, it takes me back a bit. Like I always like to say, I joked, I grew up in a lie because I was told that I lived in like the city of Cape Town, and I really didn't. And I had a great upbringing, but in the suburbia, kind of on the hill in kind of around Deer Park. But it was really a case of steep hills, big homes, pavements were for gardeners and no one ever walked on them. And so I didn't really have a big city experience. And as a kid growing up, you were really limited by your school environment where your parents would take you. And there was no real communal assets. There was no like urban experience to kind of participate in. And then I was really lucky in my architecture degree. I took a gap year and I spent quite a bit of time in Latin America. And there, obviously, I mean, Latin design cities are personally some of my favorite cities in the world. And South Africans have a big penchant for going to Europe to get to some great Mediterranean city and falling in love with it because it's intoxicating plazas and streets and cafes and the right kind of scale of a city. And I just spent a lot of time falling in love with an urban city. And then by fluke, I bought my home in Sea Point in 2011. I always joke I was BB, which is before bootlegger. So we actually moved in, quite a long time ago, bought a great apartment. And this was when there was still many more interesting options on Main Road that were kind of a few more ladies of the night. And funny enough, my late grandfather had a home on Upper Clarence Road and I have a home on Clarence Road. So it was just by absolute fluke that ended up happening. And we started working in property. We were already working in property in kind of broader Cape Town, Joburg, and Pretoria. But just so you never know when you're having luck, and there's so many forces beyond your control that put me in Sea Point at that time, and through a regeneration that I got to watch happen. When I moved to Sea Point, there wasn't the My City bus route hadn't opened yet. There wasn't one good coffee shop in Sea Point, which is hard to in the whole Atlantic seaboard, which is hard to imagine. And so it's really been amazing to see all the effort from so many individual role players that have contributed to its reemergence at like a really incredible and exciting and certainly upward trending suburb. Yeah.
Got you. So let's go back to when you were at school. Entrepreneurs don't always know that they're entrepreneurs. Some of them do, the likes of Gary Vaynerchuk, who are like 3 years old trying to sell baseball cards to people. Do you think it's something you knew that you had when you were at school, or when was the realization there that, okay, I think I've got a gift for business or property or both.
Neither.
Are you still figuring it out at the moment?
Yeah. No, from for as long as I can remember, and my mom can, it's like I always wanted to be an architect. That was since I grew up. I've always made models, built airplanes, ships, tanks, Lego forever. You name it, I wanted to build it, and I always just wanted to make things. So I would spend hours. She said I was a great kid because like 4 hours later, and you just hadn't said a word. So I think I've always loved making things. And I think before I understood what the word architecture meant, I wanted to be an architect. And actually, by fluke, I ended up in property because in end '08, I graduated from UCT, which was the perfect time to not graduate because it was the global financial crisis and there wasn't a job in town. And the only job I kind of farmed myself out to every agency, every firm I could. And the best job offer I got was snagging balustrades and tiles at Mbombela Stadium in Nelspruit. So I was like finished an 8-year degree, murdered yourself, like to try and I was never I was a decent architect. I was never really good. And to like have murdered yourself for 8 years to go and walk up and down and look at balustrades in a town in the middle of nowhere, it was actually quite heart wrenching. And then I kind of just had to fall into entrepreneurship, and that was a few mates were looking at kind of taking old buggered distressed properties and refurbing them. One was in finance, one was in real estate. I was in architecture. So kind of just a lot of like timing and not necessarily design. I think Blok became a bit more intentional in design by 2014, but certainly my arrival into entrepreneurship was unintentional. I was going to be an architect for all intents and purposes. And it's certainly been the school of hard knocks, but I think that's every entrepreneur's journey,
And that transition from working at Mbombela on the snags into okay, we're going to take our first stab at buying a building or looking at a business. How did that process happen?
Oh, geez, we're going back. This is 2009. We made an offer, and early 2010. Geez, I'm feeling old now. A mate of mine was watching what was happening with all the auctions and kind of all the distressed properties that were happening post the financial crisis. And then we like started watching and driving and going to the auctions and trying to determine value. And this was like there's a lot more technical data available today that can help you understand valuations and property insights, whether it's transfer deed, title deed information from transfers, agency information. Back then there was 13, 14 years ago, there wasn't as much data available. So we would spend and I was doing freelance architecture for like teeny renovations, and my mate had a finance job and the other mate was working in marketing and real estate. So we'd spend every Saturday, Sunday going to look at show houses, going to look at properties and trying to say, okay, well, there's an auction coming up in 3-4 weeks in that area. Oof, like flooding back memories here, Murray. And we'd actually just go and kick the tires and like look at, so the first home we ever bought, or I ever bought as an investment, not as a home, was in Bel Air in Belleville, which is 10 Holly Close. It was a primary home with a semi-detached, like little one bed on the side with a pool and a double garage, like northern suburbs vanilla, like absolutely face brick, obviously. But I remember how many properties we would just went to go into and look and visit show days to try and like get a feel for values, get a feel for rental. And then we attended an auction. It was an on-site auction. And we were really lucky. My dad said he'd stand surety with the three of us. So all of us young-ishsters were kind of putting all of our like spare income into it. And and it was a lot of Saturdays and Sundays, hey?
Was it?
Yeah, just because we all had full-time gigs and just trying to figure out what market value was, what returns would look like in, I think today you do a lot more from your laptop.
Yes.
What I did. I'll never forget, it was you kind of only got access into the property on the day of the auction. So you could go and like stand on the outside and like look in through the windows and everything, but you didn't really get the full insight into it until on the auction day. It was a deceased estate. Yeah.
What did you pay for it?
Oh my God. I think it was about 800,000-900,000 Rand.
Okay.
And it was an excellent yielding asset because it had a double income stream. We had a little one bed on the side that was rented to one person and then a family rented the main home. And look, I mean, geez, I made plenty of mistakes. The first tenant arrived for showing, and I was doing it like we were bootstrapping. I was out there showing, driving from Sea Point to Belleville to go show people the spot. And I mean, a tenant applied and came in with cash and desperate and stories, and I was so overwhelmed by the experience. I accepted them, and then they didn't pay after that. Then I had to
Goodness
I
me.
had to pay them to leave. So
Oh
like
no.
it's a school of hard knocks. It's like lots of mistakes, but it was an amazing investment. And luckily enough, a guy who came to that auction, Kobus Latergan, he arrived in an old beat up combi that was filled with all of his equipment and tools. And he's heard that we bought the property, gave his business card, and he ended up refurbing properties that we bought for us from, that was end '09. I met Kobus. I think in 2019, we stopped working together. So we spent like a decade together
No way.
doing work. So it's like, again, another huge piece of fluke. And he was the most incredible, like early 60s Afrikaans guy, like just salt of
Just
the
salt of the
earth.
earth.
Yeah, just so
Awesome.
amazing, and knew how to do everything for cheaper than anybody else.
Wow.
And did everything himself. So he was a huge luck and a great resource for me to have as we were bootstrapping it.
Got you.
So that was a lot. Look, I mean, really lucky that we had my dad who was happy to help us apply for that first mortgage. And then we ended up buying over like 4 months. We bought 4 or 5 months. We bought 5 homes on
Okay.
auction, and they were. I mean, it's one of those horrible sayings. You make your money when you buy.
Yes.
And luckily on those ones we did. But I think we were buying at a time when no one else was, and prices were really depressed, and we had reasonable incomes on the properties.
Okay.
So I think like that made for a good investment
Got you.
at that time. Yeah.
Who played a role, if anyone, in your life in terms of the property industry, whether it's possibly a book that you've read or a family member or a friend, in shaping the way you think about your business and the property industry?
I think I was really lucky. Samuel Seif from Seif Properties was after we bought a few homes, we got a few other shareholders together to go buy some more of these homes and take buggered up old stock and make them really nice, like family rental homes. A lot of property companies in the US were doing similar, but at like massive scale at this time. Like I think Blackstone did like multi-billion-dollar, like they were buying debt books from banks at that stage. But we were doing our own teeny little thing here in Cape Town. And Samuel became one of the shareholders, and it was amazing, to learn from him such intimate experience. And he, I hope I don't get the details wrong, but I think his father passed away when he was very young, and they had a small agency in Muizenberg. I think if it's not Muizenberg, it's in that kind of southern peninsula area there, like Fischhoek or Simonstown around there. And at 18, and his older brother was a couple of years older than him, they had to step into the family shoes to
Wow.
run the business. So he did it from the moment he finished school. So, and to have built a really successful large organization and to get his understanding of the market. And so he was a huge influence on my first 5-6 years in property. And I'm extremely grateful. Again, a bit of timing and a bit of luck that he ended up there. And him and my father had known each other for a long time. So yeah, it was extremely lucky to have that. And yeah,
That's amazing.
yeah. And we got to tap into, with the licensee structure, we got to tap into his licensee owners in the various areas. So if we were going to the northern suburbs, I'd go meet a guy who was willing to give of his time, who knew the northern suburbs area. I mean, like I always joke, I think I've done more parts of Cape Town than most. Like I know the subtleties around the 5 different sub areas that make up Kales River, and where's on this side of the railway versus that side of the railway, which was a historic area, which is a new area, which is more English, which is more Afrikaans, which is kind of, so I was really lucky that people were willing to kind of give of their time. And I also think it was quite 2010 to 2014 was quite a difficult time in real estate in South Africa. I always remind my team now that there was, from 2010 to 2014, there was 1 apartment building developed in the whole of the Atlantic seaboard for 5 years.
What?
And it was the Legacy by Berman Brothers on Greenpoint Main Road.
No way.
There's 1 building in 5 years. There's 1 crane. Whereas you look now, there's like, we have 4 cranes, it's like, and it just shows you like there is different cycles and there's different environments.
Yeah.
So I think property was in quite a challenging space, and that probably contributed to just people were interested, that, people were interested.
Completely.
Yeah.
So you guys have, so you started off you were thinking about property. You obviously are a thoroughbred entrepreneur, if I don't say so myself.
It's very kind.
Specifically in the property space, you then had some really good influence from people close to you, like Samuel Seif. And then there's a gap between 2014 and where you are now, which is pretty much dominating the property space in Sea Point and building really cool products. Like, tell us about that time and that process between starting on buying old houses and fixing them up to where you guys are in 2023, and just that process that you went through, and like the incremental process of improving yourself and a business. And I know it doesn't happen overnight. You might see 4 cranes in Sea Point, but that didn't happen out of nowhere. Maybe tell us about that part of your journey.
Yeah, it's another great saying that Samuel said. You're either a 10-year overnight failure or a 10-year overnight success. So Blok turned 9 recently, so I got a year and a bit left.
Wow, happy birthday!
To get it to that point of, and I think it speaks to, I think just the media and a lot of the publications, the books you can read, they kind of promote a unicorn bias, which is these ridiculous stories of ridiculous success in short periods of time. I think most of, and I have a few other property mentors, and a lot of them have spoken about just organizations as a whole, whether you're a non-for-profit, whether you're a for-profit organization, you only post 10 years have you typically gone through 3 cycles. So that might be 2 ups and a down, or 2 downs and an up. You've probably faced product market fit crises, staff crises. You've evolved. You've kind of done a lot in your organization to reach a point of sustainability. So, and I got a lot of comfort from some of my mentors. Sorry, now I'll come back to the question now. But in getting that comfort that like it's actually a 10-year time horizon, and in the short snappy world of today of like success immediately and everything's got to like work the first time, it gave me a lot of comfort in that. And that kind of, I arrived at probably only around about 2019, 2020. So it was about halfway through the Blok story, and it started changing the way that I run the business, because it wasn't so much around everything had to be the biggest, the best immediately.
Yes.
There was a different kind of tempo. I realized I was doing a very long journey that needed my energy, like almost hiking versus sprinting, and I just had to know that every day I had to get up and I had to march. And that kind of, it gave a lot better sense of my energy management, of what achievements look like. And so that was a wonderful thing that arrived midway through the career. I think jumping back to the birth of Blok, we were doing in Woodstock, one of the other things we evolved to as the market started to pick up and it got harder to find kind of distressed or refurb opportunities, or actually the market just became more competitive. We would try buy 25 to 30% below what we thought value was. And suddenly more and more people were attending the auctions, and your ability to get stock at a discount that you were looking for decreased, because there might be an owner occupier who was happy with a 10% discount on market, which makes so much sense. But you needed 25% to make your model work. So you just realized we were struggling to get opportunities. But we were doing quite a lot of conversions in Woodstock, where we were taking small homes to big homes, and we were ending up cutting up to 2 or 4 homes. And there was a great little model, and Tommy Brummer, a wonderful town planner, I learned at his desk, the new zoning scheme that came in 2013, and he's been in the business forever, and he taught me the zoning scheme through various projects we were looking at, and like silly things like again, timing. There was, from a single residential 1 site, while we were there, they changed it that you could apply for 2 residences without advertising. So every single home you could suddenly do 2. And I'm a big believer in density personally in great city centers. So suddenly there was a model that opened up. So it was very responsive to what the conditions were at any point in time. So we were taking homes, and 1 home became 2, or we cut the earth in half and it became 4. And while we were doing this, 2 things we saw. The first one was Signatura started doing their work up on in Frederhoek, and I call it branded real estate, which you know well. And then the second, I went for my cousin's wedding in Miami, and branded real estate was really big there, So it was the first time that I'd seen real estate companies position themselves as B2C, so business to customer, before a developer was kind of a company name, and then the billboard was the agency selling it, you know,
Yes.
and we've even seen since then over time, like Growth Point now advertisers. Before it was B2B, you know, they didn't see themselves as a brand and as an identity. And so I think it was kind of part of a global movement around that time. So we saw branded real estate as something really interesting and resonated with us. Saw design being important, which was really cool. You know, it was actually like, oh, if you give effort in design, your brand will benefit. Whereas if it's once off and you don't have an identity, where's the return on that investment in design? And then we were seeing what John Robbie and his team were selling for per square meter, and we were like, "Well, we're the idiots, you know, we're doing the same work, like 2 kilometers or less, like probably a kilometer away, like for a fraction of the return that he was able to achieve." And so that was, and we'd had a few assets, one in Bantry Bay, one in Sea Point, and one in Friedehoek, that were like old apartment blocks or a little home, and we kind of said, "Well, like let's start making conversions or building new apartment buildings in these areas." So it was, again, a big, I think part of, I say timing a lot, but I think what kind of works well in tandem with timing is you've got to be heads up. So you got to be seeing, you got to see the timing, you know, it's, as a great saying is, take advantage of the opportunity of a lifetime in the lifetime of the opportunity.
Yes, I hear you, man. That is super valuable.
Yeah. So timing is important, but you've got to also kind of see it and respond accordingly. So yeah, Blok was September 4th, 2014. We opened the doors. Little did we know.
2014, man.
Yeah.
I hear you about the 10-year journey. I think naturally as entrepreneurs in any industry, we want to move things from A to B as fast as possible. But you're the second person I've heard use the word march instead of a sprint. I listened to a really cool podcast by the founder of a company called Placemaker in the US. I think they're based in Washington, D.C. And he was just saying how important it is to like march instead of sprinting especially in the built environment. I don't think it's necessarily a breakneck speed. And there's obviously been a lot of industry news about WeWork and a few other companies coming under a lot of pressure recently. So I completely concur. As much as it is difficult to do sometimes, how do you find deals?
It's just a quick one on there. It's always like I personally struggle from it. I don't know about you, but like I have to work hard to watch my competitors or watch other people in my market and in my industry and not feel frustration. If I feel like they're doing something smarter than me or faster than me or bigger than me, and it's really hard to do that. And I think it's something that I consistently have to work at. And it's like you see the WeWork stories, you see like the Sonder stories and these great stories, and you're like, oh, you like there's this frustration. But then, you know, some people can do it, but I think scaling in real estate is very different to scaling in other industries. And I think that there's another side to that coin, which is that it's a very hard to move industry. So if you get a foothold and you get a niche or a model that you know how to execute on, it is quite slow moving because it's flipping bricks and mortar.
Completely.
Yeah. So it's the negative is scaling does take longer, but the positive is that it's quite hard to move. It's actual physical assets, and it's hard to change the industry quickly. So it is far more defendable. Whereas tech is like, I mean, God, tech is like a 6-month like window of kind of first to market innovation, and then and then it's gone. You know, tech as an advantage in tech innovation as an advantage is very short lived.
Completely, 100%. Our last question for this episode, to the young men and women who are looking to try and get into the property market. How do you even start finding deals? Where do you even start? How would you recommend, or how would you give advice?
Interesting. So the first one is easy. If you want to get into actually developing something, like making something, I think it's extremely high risk, like an irrational degree of high risk to do it without someone who's experienced and done it before. But that's in one segment. And I think the making part of real estate is the hardest. It's why the big funds all end up in M&A, because for Growth Point to build enough physical assets in a year that moves the needle on their portfolio size. Building is really hard. You've seen, my God, your renovate, you're late, your money, your overruns, your time, your interest burn, you name it. So, and we got landowners that bring us sites and they all kind of get a little bit confident. I'm like going, you don't have to work with me. I'd strongly suggest for your financial security, because you have an asset that you've worked hard for, partner with someone who's experienced and knows their game, whether it's an architect or a QS or a developer that you can partner with someone from experience, because the construction side is brutal. And you can even look at it at the service providers. There was like 20, 30 years ago, there was 6 or 7 companies listed on the main exchange, the JSE, that were construction companies. There's now 0.
Nuts, man.
So
crazy.
It's totally like the industry is really hard to run. And if those are the people you contract with, it tells you a lot about the industry. In terms of starting something in property, whatever it might be, I think, spend a lot of time experiencing, kicking the tires, and go look at the products you're interested in, go look at the niches you're interested in. And I think property's going through a lot of change. I mean, your business is an excellent example of disruption in what is home, what is a stay, what is work, what is, all these things are kind of being reinterpreted. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in there, but most times property requires quite a bit more capital than most other entrepreneurial endeavors. So spend time like walking the streets, kick the tires of whatever that is. If you want to start a surf shack in St. Francis, if you want to start like a luxury something, like, I mean, there's so many amazing products coming out, like pop-up timber, like environmentally friendly huts in beautiful scenery in the amazing Western Cape. And through channels like Airbnb and Booking.com and Instagram, people are like making really thriving businesses doing hospitality, being a lodger. And so I think there's so many ways to innovate in the space, but do the work, do the work and the research.
Thank you so much, Jacques. We appreciate it and look forward to having you on our next episode.
Thank you so much for having me.